Hey there, welcome back to Story Slices, where we slice through the best Reddit tales just for you. Let's dive right into the first story. The first one is the Tittle story, and it starts like this. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation straight out of an internet horror story, but here I am. It all started on a scorching hot Saturday in July. I was relaxing by the pool at my lakefront property, enjoying a cold beer and some much-needed downtime after a hectic work week. Some background: I'm Jake, a 35-year-old software engineer. A few years ago, I was fortunate enough to purchase a modest but beautiful lakefront home about an hour outside the city. It came with a decent-sized in-ground pool overlooking the lake. Nothing too fancy, but it was my little slice of paradise. I'd often invite friends and coworkers out for weekend barbecues and pool parties during the summer months. On this particular Saturday, I was flying solo. My girlfriend was out of town visiting family, and I was looking forward to a quiet day of swimming, reading, and decompressing. The peace and tranquility lasted about 2 hours before all hell broke loose. I had just gotten out of the pool and was toweling off when I heard the unmistakable sound of car doors slamming shut, followed by loud voices and laughter. Confused, I walked around to the front of the house to investigate. To my utter shock, I saw 3 minivans parked in my driveway. A group of about 15 people, adults and kids, were unloading coolers, pool floats, and beach bags. Leading the pack was a woman in her mid-40s with the stereotypical, "Can I speak to the manager?" haircut. She wore oversized sunglasses and a caftan that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. I'll call her Karen because, well, you'll see why. As I stood there slack-jawed, Karen noticed me and waved enthusiastically. "Oh, hello there," she chirped. "You must be the new pool boy. Perfect timing. We could use some fresh towels and maybe a round of lemonades." I blinked, trying to process what was happening. "Excuse me?" I managed to sputter out. "I'm not the pool boy. This is my house. Who are you people?" Karen's smile faltered for a moment before widening again. "Oh, sweetie, there's no need to be coy. We know all about this place. It's the Anderson summer rental, right? They said we could use it any time." Now, I had purchased this property from a couple named Anderson about 3 years ago, but I had no idea who these people were or why they thought they had carte blanche to show up uninvited. "I'm sorry, but there's been a misunderstanding," I said firmly. "I bought this house from the Andersons 3 years ago. This is my private property, not a rental. I'm going to have to ask you all to leave." Karen's face clouded over. She took off her sunglasses and fixed me with an icy stare. "Listen here, young man. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but we drove over an hour to get here. The kids are hot and cranky. We're using this pool whether you like it or not." With that, she turned on her heel and started herding her group towards the backyard. I stood there in disbelief for a moment before snapping out of it and chasing after them. "Hey, wait a minute," I called out. "You can't just barge onto someone's private property like this." But it was too late. By the time I rounded the corner of the house, half the kids were already in the pool, squealing and splashing. The adults were setting up lawn chairs and unpacking picnic baskets like they owned the place. I approached Karen, who was busy slathering sunscreen on a squirming toddler. "Ma'am, I'm serious. This is not a public pool or a rental property. You need to gather your things and leave immediately." Karen didn't even look up. "I don't think so, honey. We're here now, and we're staying. Why don't you run along and fetch us those lemonades? There's a good boy." I felt my blood pressure rising. "I am not your servant," I snapped. "I'm the owner of this property, and you are trespassing. Leave now, or I'm calling the police." That got her attention. Karen stood up, hands on her hips. "Is that a threat?" she hissed. "Because I'll have you know my husband is a very prominent lawyer. If you want to involve the authorities, be my guest, but I promise you'll regret it." I pulled out my phone, fully intending to make good on my threat to call the cops. But then I paused, an idea forming. These entitled jerks wanted to play games? Fine. I'd play along, but they wouldn't like the end result. "You know what? Never mind," I said, plastering on a fake smile. "My mistake? You folks enjoy yourselves. I'll go grab those lemonades." Karen looked surprised but pleased. "Well, I'm glad you finally came to your senses. And don't forget the fresh towels." I nodded and retreated into the house, my mind racing. I had no intention of playing cabana boy for these trespassers, but I did have a plan forming, one that would teach them a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. First things first, I needed backup. I called my next-door neighbor, Mike, a retired cop who had become a good friend over the years. "Hey Mike," I said when he picked up, "you're not going to believe what's happening at my place right now. I've got a gang of entitled strangers who've basically invaded my backyard and taken over the pool. They refuse to leave and are threatening legal action if I try to kick them out." Mike let out a low whistle. "Geez, that's nuts. Want me to come over and help sort things out?" "Actually, I've got an idea," I replied, "but I could use your help pulling it off. How quickly can you get here?" I laid out my plan, and Mike chuckled. "Oh, this is going to be good. Give me 10 minutes. I'll bring reinforcements." While I waited for Mike, I busied myself gathering supplies. I filled a pitcher with lemonade, after adding a generous helping of salt instead of sugar. I also grabbed every towel I could find, the rattiest, moldiest old rags from the back of my linen closet. Carrying my tray of refreshments, I headed back outside. The scene that greeted me was like something out of a bizarre fever dream. Kids were running amok, screaming and splashing. A couple of the men had commandeered my grill and were attempting to light it. 2 women were loudly critiquing my landscaping choices. And there was Karen, holding court from a lounge chair like the queen of the backyard. Finally, she exclaimed when she saw me. "What took you so long? We're parched out here." I gritted my teeth and forced a smile. "So sorry for the delay, folks. Who wants lemonade?" Several people raised their hands, and I started pouring. I watched with barely concealed glee as they took their first sips. The reactions were instantaneous. Grimaces, sputtering. One kid even spat his mouthful back into the pool. "What is this?" Karen shrieked, examining her glass. "It tastes like seawater." I feigned confusion. "Oh no, I must have mixed up the salt and sugar. How terribly clumsy of me. Let me get you some fresh towels to clean up with." I distributed the nasty old towels, reveling in their horrified expressions as they realized just how grimy and threadbare they were. "These are disgusting," one of the women exclaimed. "Don't you have any clean towels?" I shrugged helplessly. "I'm so sorry, the laundry service must be running behind. I'll be sure to lodge a complaint with management." Karen narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "I thought you said this wasn't a rental property. What management are you talking about?" Before I could answer, I heard the blessed sound of car doors slamming shut once again. Mike had arrived, and he'd brought company. I turned to see Mike striding into the backyard, accompanied by 2 uniformed police officers. He was also carrying a stack of official-looking documents. "Jake, my boy?" Mike called out jovially. "I brought those property records you asked for." "Oh, and I ran into Officers Johnson and Martinez on my way over. Hope you don't mind that I invited them to join the party." The atmosphere in the backyard shifted instantly. The kids scrambled out of the pool, and the adults exchanged nervous glances. Karen stood up, smoothing her caftan and plastering on a simpering smile. "Officers, how lovely of you to join us," she cooed. "I do hope everything is all right." Officer Johnson looked stern. "Ma'am, we received a report of trespassing at this address. Are you the property owner?" Karen's smile faltered. "Well, no, but—" "I am," I interjected, stepping forward. "Officers, these people showed up uninvited and refused to leave when I asked them to. They claimed this was a rental property they had permission to use, but that's completely false. I have documentation proving my ownership right here." I took the stack of papers from Mike and handed them to Officer Martinez, who began leafing through them. Karen's face had gone pale. "Now, wait just a minute," she sputtered. "There's been a misunderstanding. We were told by friends that this property was available for us to use. We had no idea." "Ma'am," Officer Johnson cut in, "ignorance is not an excuse for trespassing. You were informed by the rightful owner that you needed to leave, and you refused. That's a crime." The other adults in the group were now hurriedly gathering their belongings, herding children towards the exit. Karen, however, wasn't going down without a fight. "This is ridiculous," she shrieked. "We are upstanding citizens. My husband is a very prominent lawyer, and when he hears about this—" "When he hears about what, exactly?" I interrupted. "How you illegally entered someone's private property, refused to leave when asked, and then threatened the owner? I'm sure he'll be thrilled to hear all about that." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. For once, she seemed at a loss for words. Officer Martinez finished reviewing the documents and nodded to his partner. "Everything checks out. This is indeed private property owned by Mr. Jake Anderson." "All right, folks, party's over," Officer Johnson announced. "I need everyone to vacate the premises immediately. Anyone still here in 5 minutes will be arrested for trespassing. Is that clear?" The exodus that followed was almost comical. Parents scrambled to collect wet, confused children. Half-eaten snacks and deflated pool toys were abandoned in the rush to leave. Karen stood rooted to the spot, seething with rage and embarrassment. As the last of her group filed out, she finally moved towards the gate, but not before turning to deliver one final glare in my direction. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You'll be hearing from our lawyer." I couldn't resist one last parting shot. "Be sure to give him my regards. Oh, and Karen, next time you want to use someone's pool, try asking first." The look on her face as she stormed off was priceless. As soon as the last car pulled out of my driveway, Mike, the officers, and I burst into laughter. "I've got to hand it to you, Jake," Mike chuckled, clapping me on the back. "That was some top-notch malicious compliance. Using their own entitlement against them? Brilliant." Officer Johnson shook his head, still grinning. "In all my years on the force, I've never seen anything quite like that. You handled it perfectly, sir. Kept your cool and let them dig their own grave." I thanked the officers for their help, and they headed out after taking my statement for the official report. Mike stayed behind to help me clean up the mess left behind by my unwanted guests. As we collected abandoned towels and emptied the spiked lemonade, I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. "You know," I mused, "part of me almost wishes they would try to pursue this legally. Can you imagine how that conversation with their lawyer would go?" Mike snorted. "Oh, to be a fly on the wall for that meeting." "Yes, Your Honor. My clients did in fact trespass on private property and refused to leave when asked, but the owner was very rude about it." We shared another laugh, but I knew this incident was far from over. Karen's parting threat might have been empty, But people like that rarely go quietly into the night. I had a feeling this was just the opening salvo in what could become a protracted battle. Sure enough, the very next morning, I awoke to find my inbox flooded with angry emails from Karen and her cronies. They ranged from thinly veiled threats of legal action to hysterical rants about how I'd ruined their children's summer. One particularly creative message suggested I was running some kind of bait-and-switch scam with my property. I forwarded the most egregious emails to Mike, who advised me to keep records of all communication but not to engage further. They're fishing for a reaction, he warned. Don't give them the satisfaction. Taking his advice to heart, I resisted the urge to fire off snarky replies. Instead, I composed a single, polite but firm response. Dear concerned parties, I understand there was confusion regarding the status of my property yesterday. To clarify, this is my private residence, not a rental or public space. Your unauthorized entry constituted trespassing, as confirmed by local law enforcement. Any further attempts to access my property without explicit permission will be reported to the police. Additionally, I consider your numerous emails harassment and will pursue legal action if they continue. I suggest we all put this unfortunate incident behind us and move on with our lives. Sincerely, Jake Anderson? I BCC'd Mike and the 2 officers who had responded yesterday, just to create a paper trail. Then I settled in to wait for the fallout. I didn't have to wait long. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing with notifications. It seemed Karen had taken to social media to air her grievances, painting herself as the victim of a cruel hoax. She'd posted a lengthy diatribe on the local community Facebook group, complete with crocodile tear emojis and calls for justice. According to Karen's version of events, I was a scam artist who had lured her group to my property under false pretenses, then humiliated them in front of their children. She conveniently left out the part where they'd shown up uninvited and refused to leave when asked. The comments section was a mixed bag. Some people were rallying behind Karen, expressing outrage at my supposed deception. Others, thankfully, seemed skeptical of her story and were asking pointed questions about why she felt entitled to use a stranger's private property. I was tempted to jump into the fray and defend myself, but Mike's words echoed in my head. Engaging would only add fuel to the fire. Instead, I screenshots of the post and comments, saving them to a folder I'd labeled Karen's Crusade. Just when I thought the situation couldn't get any more surreal, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hello, is this Jake Anderson? A clipped professional voice inquired. Yes, this is he, I replied cautiously. Mr. Anderson, this is Gerald Winters from the law offices of Winters & Associates. I'm calling on behalf of my client, Karen Johnson, regarding an incident that occurred on your property yesterday. I felt a mixture of dread and amusement. So Karen had made good on her threat to sick her lawyer husband on me. This ought to be interesting. Yes, Mr. Winters, I said, keeping my tone neutral. I'm aware of the incident. How can I help you? Mr. Anderson, my client feels she was unfairly treated and humiliated at your residence. She's considering pursuing legal action for emotional distress and defamation of character. However, we're willing to discuss an out-of-court settlement if you're amenable. I had to stifle a laugh. This guy couldn't be serious. I'm sorry, Mr. Winters, but I'm a bit confused. Your client trespassed on my private property, refused to leave when asked, and then harassed me via email and social media. On what grounds exactly is she considering legal action? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Mr. Winters spoke again, his tone was noticeably less confident. Well, Mrs. Johnson claims she was led to believe your property was a rental available for public use. She feels your actions in disabusing her of this notion were unnecessarily harsh and caused undue distress to her family and friends. I see, I replied calmly. And does Mrs. Johnson have any evidence to support her belief that my private home was actually a public rental property? Perhaps a rental agreement or booking confirmation? Another uncomfortable pause. Well, no, but, Mr. Winters, I interjected, I think we both know this case has no merit. I have police reports and witness statements confirming that your client trespassed on my property and refused to leave when asked. I also have documentation of the harassing emails and social media posts she's made since the incident. If anyone has grounds for legal action here, it's me. I could practically hear the wheels turning in the lawyer's head as he realized he'd backed the wrong horse in this fight. Now, I continued, I'm willing to let this whole thing go if your client agrees to cease all contact with me and remove her defamatory social media posts. Otherwise, I'll be forced to pursue my own legal options. What do you say we call it a draw and everyone goes home happy? Mr. Winters cleared his throat. I think that's a very reasonable suggestion, Mr. Anderson. I'll discuss it with my client and get back to you. Wonderful, I said cheerfully. Oh, and Mr. Winters, you might want to have a chat with your wife about the dangers of trespassing. Have a great day. I hung up before he could respond, feeling a mix of relief and satisfaction. I had a feeling I wouldn't be hearing from Lawyer Boy again anytime soon. True to form, Karen's social media crusade against me vanished within the hour. The harassing emails stopped, and an uneasy quiet settled over the whole affair. I'd like to say that was the end of it, but entitled people rarely go down without a fight. Over the next few weeks, I noticed some strange occurrences around my property. Trash would mysteriously appear strewn across my lawn overnight. My mailbox was knocked over twice. One morning I woke up to find my car had been egged. I couldn't prove it was Karen or her cronies, but the timing was too convenient to be coincidence. I invested in some security cameras and caught a few grainy images of figures skulking around my property at night, but nothing clear enough to take to the police. The final straw came about a month after the initial incident. I returned home from work to find my pool had been filled with some kind of green dye, turning the water into a murky, swamp-like mess. A crude note was taped to my back door. "Enjoy your private swim, jerk." That was it? I'd had enough of playing defense. It was time to go on the offensive. I called Mike and filled him in on the ongoing harassment. "I'm done letting these people walk all over me," I fumed. "What can I do to put a stop to this once and for all?" Mike was quiet for a moment, then chuckled. "You know, I might have an idea, but it's going to require a bit of acting on your part. You up for it?" As Mike laid out his plan, a slow grin spread across my face. It was devious, it was a little bit mean, and it was absolutely perfect. The next day, I put out a few strategically placed posts on social media. I talked about how guilty I'd been feeling about the pool incident and how I wanted to make amends. I announced that I'd be hosting a Community Appreciation Day at my Lakefront property that Saturday, complete with a free barbecue and open pool access. I made sure to tag Karen and a few of her friends in the posts, extending a personal olive branch. "I hope we can put our differences aside and enjoy a beautiful day by the lake together," I wrote, laying it on thick. The response was immediate. Karen commented with a suspiciously gracious acceptance, saying she was touched by my change of heart. Several of her friends chimed in, saying they were looking forward to the event. What they didn't know was that Mike had called in a few favors with his old colleagues at the police department. They'd be sending over a few plainclothes officers to monitor the situation. We also invited a reporter from the local newspaper, telling her we had a feeling there might be an interesting story developing. Saturday dawned bright and clear. Perfect pool party weather. I fired up the grill and set out a spread of snacks and drinks. Right on cue, Karen and her entourage arrived, looking like they were dressed for a country club luncheon rather than a casual barbecue. "Jake," Karen trilled, air kissing my cheeks, "how wonderful of you to host this little get-together. We're so glad you've seen the error of your ways." I plastered on my best fake smile. "Of course, Karen. I felt just terrible about how things went down last time. I hope this makes up for it." For the next hour or so, I played the perfect host. I flipped burgers, mixed drinks, and made small talk with Karen's friends. All the while, I was acutely aware of the plainclothes officers mingling with the crowd, and the reporters scribbling notes in the corner. Finally, when the party was in full swing and most of the guests were in the pool, I made my move. I clinked a glass to get everyone's attention. "Excuse me, everyone. I just wanted to thank you all for coming today. It means so much to me that we could all come together like this." Karen beamed, clearly thinking she'd won some kind of victory. Little did she know, the trap was about to snap shut. "In fact," I continued, "I've been so moved by this experience that I've decided to make a big change. I'm donating this entire property to the city, to be turned into a public park and swimming area." A chorus of gasps and excited murmurs rippled through the crowd. Karen's smile froze on her face. "That's right," I said, warming to my theme. "No more confusion about whether this is private property or not. From now on, it'll be open to everyone." I turned to the reporter, who was furiously taking notes. "I've already spoken with the mayor's office, and they're thrilled about the idea. Construction on the new public facilities will begin next month." The reactions from the crowd were mixed. Some people were genuinely excited about the prospect of a new public park. Others, particularly Karen and her inner circle, looked like they'd just swallowed lemons. But what about the exclusivity?" Karen sputtered. "The privacy? You can't just turn this beautiful property into a public free-for-all." I fixed her with an innocent look. "But Karen, I thought this was what you wanted? After all, you seemed so upset when I told you this was private property before. Now everyone can enjoy it." Karen's face cycled through a range of emotions: shock, anger, embarrassment. She opened her mouth to argue, but seemed to realize she was beaten at her own game. It was at that moment that Mike gave the signal, and the plainclothes officers revealed themselves. "All right, folks," one of them announced. "I'm afraid we're going to have to shut this party down. We've received noise complaints from the neighbors." As the crowd began to disperse, looking confused and a little shell-shocked, I pulled Karen aside. "Oh, by the way," I said in a low voice, "I lied about donating the property. It's still very much private, and you're still very much trespassing. I'd suggest you leave now before these nice officers decide to press charges." The look of impotent rage on Karen's face as she stormed off was absolutely priceless. As soon as the last guest had left, Mike, the officers, and I burst into laughter. "I've got to hand it to you, Jake," Mike chuckled, wiping tears from his eyes. "That was some world-class payback. I don't think Karen and her crew will be bothering you again anytime soon." He was right. In the weeks that followed, I didn't see hide nor hair of Karen or her friends. The harassment stopped completely. I even noticed a few apologetic comments on my social media from people who had initially sided with Karen, saying they now understood the full story. The local newspaper ran a small piece about the incident, framing it as a humorous misunderstanding that led to a valuable lesson about respecting private property. Karen was thoroughly embarrassed, and I heard through the grapevine that she'd become something of a local laughingstock. As for me, I kept my promise to be more community-minded, but on my own terms. I started hosting legitimate charity events at my property a few times a year, raising money for local causes. It was a way to give back without sacrificing my privacy or letting entitled people walk all over me. In the end, I learned a valuable lesson about standing up for myself and not letting bullies push me around, even if those bullies come armed with designer sunglasses and a misplaced sense of entitlement. And Karen? Well, I hear she's taken up a new hobby, reading up on property law and the definition of trespassing. Sometimes, the best revenge is a well-taught lesson. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow at Story Slices.